conversation today on exploring change through culture. My name is Lindsay Farrell. I'm the co-founder of the Grandmother Collective, an organization that is focused on leveraging the power of grandmothers and older women around the world to advance social outcomes everywhere. We began last year and have been hosting monthly calls with organizations around the world who see that tapping the wisdom of older women and engaging them in change making is an abundant resource. Our organization was inspired by the work of a few pioneers in the field of holistic community development, not least our guest for today, Dr. Judi Aubel. Judi is the co-founder and executive director of Grandmother Project Change Through Culture. And she has 20 years of experience working with community health, education, and child protection programs, primarily in Africa, but also in Latin America, Asia, and the Pacific. Her interest and expertise is in the development of community programs that build on sociocultural realities and roles, including that of grandmothers and older women, and that empower communities to promote their own well-being. I'm so delighted that Judi agreed to come and share more about her journey, and specifically to share her insights on the role that culture plays in making systemic social change. Hi, Judi, thank you so much. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your personal background and what led you to found the Grandmother Project? What needs specifically did you uncover?
Okay. Yeah, good morning, afternoon to everyone. I think first of all, just one point to clarify, at least in the world of development, the word project is usually used to refer to something that's a certain length of time, 1 or 2 or 5 years, whatever. But in this case, this is an ongoing project. I think I think there's a tiger project in India, which is ongoing effort to save the tigers. And in this case, Grandmother Project Change Through Culture really is about an ongoing effort to develop programs to support the well-being and development of women and children, especially girls, using approaches that are grounded in cultural values and realities. And so Grandmother Project is an American nonprofit and also a Senegalese NGO. In response to Lindsay's question about my background, I think actually I grew up in California on the West Coast in a very sort of middle-class Anglo-American family. And it was only really when I went off to university in the University of California at Davis and then in Los Angeles that I became exposed and really interested in other cultural contexts. And so along the way was a Peace Corps volunteer in Ivory Coast in West Africa with I think Lillian, is Lillian still here? She was there. Yeah, there she is. Lillian Bear was actually, who's with us today, was one of my Peace Corps trainers back when. And so that experience, and then going back and working in Head Start in communities, primarily with Latino and primarily Latino kids in Southern California, really increased my, well, 2 things. I think awareness of really the significant cultural differences between different societies, and also made me more and more aware of the complexity of promoting change within those cultures, because all cultures, people who are part of them, they are proud of who they are and what their values are, and what the roles of people are in their society. So yeah, and so my actually my academic background, I spent a lot of time actually in universities, and to start out with in early childhood development, and then later in adult education, and then another time in public health, and ultimately, yeah, my doctorate's in anthropology. So all of that kind of helping to well, increase, I would say, my sensitivity to the whole issue of the interface between development programs and communities. And I guess the more you study and understand, the more you realize how complex that, interface is. So an early experience, the initial years of working mostly in Africa, but also some in Asia, in community health programs, as a consultant with other organizations, I became increasingly aware of the fact that all of these programs, maternal and child health, were narrowly or only focused really on mothers, and leaving out other critical, influential cultural actors, namely the grandmothers. And so an initial experience in Laos, and then in West Africa, and in Tunisia, and in Albania, each time realizing that while perhaps in Western context, the nuclear family families are structured around the nuclear family, and in the majority world, as we refer to it, the 88% of the cultures in the world that are more collectivist than individualist, in those non-Western settings, the extended family is still very influential, and within the extended family, multi-generational influences. So yeah, in 2005, with after having had some initial experiences as a consultant with an Australian colleague, journalist friend, Elizabeth Mealy, we created Grandmother Project. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really so I think maybe it would be helpful to hear just a little bit more about what you mean by change through culture and how that manifests in the grandmother
Right.
aspect of it. But I do want to just really emphasize, you've come from the confluence of adult education, public health, cultural cultural studies, to create something that we see as really holistic and really about integrating all components and not being like kind of stuck. I think what we, if you've spent time thinking about international development or change, getting stuck sort of on the trends, that this is really a systemic way to like slowly, painfully sometimes evolve a whole community to make a change. So do you want to share a little bit more about the model itself, and you kind of like how you came to see this particular model as a way to do change through culture?
Right. So yeah, really on lessons learned, and doing a lot of program evaluations of different community programs, and insights from these different disciplines. The change through culture approach that we've developed really has 5 key elements. The first one I've started talking about, and that is building on cultural context and realities. And very often all the time, culture is referred to as a constraint or an obstacle or as a barrier. And in our case, we view culture as a resource, and really the foundation should be the foundation for all programs in international development. The second pillar of Grandmother Project is recognizing and explicitly and actively involving elders. Mm-hmm. In all of the non-Western societies and indigenous cultures in North America, Australia, and New Zealand, elders play a critical role within a hierarchy, acknowledged for their wisdom and status. And so, yeah, the second pillar really explicitly involving elders, and especially grandmothers, because our grandmother project is really focused on improving the lives of women and children. And so while certainly grandfathers are supportive, grandmothers are on center stage. The third pillar is strengthening communication between generations. Unfortunately, without not talking about the global north, but in the non-Western world, unfortunately, and people are sometimes surprised when I say this, but in many, many cases, there's a severe, well, a considerable, if not a severe breakdown in communication between elders, adults, and young people, with young people going one direction and elders and parents, kind of on the other. And I think as Lindsay was saying, to bring about change within family or community systems, there needs to be communication. And so a key element in all of our work is strengthening the communication between the generations and between the sexes. The fourth pillar is explicitly identifying and working with community leaders, formal and informal community leaders, given their role in either facilitating or blocking processes of change within communities. We talk about the community, but within that community, there are certain actors who certainly have considerable influence over others. And lastly, and in contrast to many development programs, actually, is the use of communication and education methods that are based on dialogue and consensus building. I mean, in community development, often it's talked about two approaches to promoting change: a confrontational approach or a consensus building approach. And it is the latter that we are the basis for development of activities with communities, kind of combined with or supported by a lot of insights from adult education and participatory learning activities. I think, just one other point that I alluded to already, but a big problem in international development programs is that programs inevitably come to change what's going on in communities, to tell them to stop doing child marriage and start, sending their girls to school where they maybe weren't. And so I think a really important aspect of our work is viewing the positive elements within communities, at the same time promoting change, but recognizing, as an example, one of the activities that we organize, that my team organizes occasionally, is days of praise of grandmothers, to acknowledge their status, their experience, the importance of their role. So that's that's a overview of our change through culture approach.
Thanks, Judi. So touching on that last point you made, you do something called a Days of Praise of Grandmothers. Now, I think it might be helpful for people to understand, like, where culture's the resource. Is there already an existing Days of Praise that you've adapted? I mean, how are the local or the community cultural aspects, features, norms, values, whatever, incorporated into your program? Like, can you give a specific example of how that might play out?
Yeah. And, I should have said at the outset, I mean, what I'm sharing with you today is, I am the one who kind of conceptualized the idea of grandmother inclusive approach, change through culture. But really, the work that we're doing, it's really my team of Senegalese colleagues who unfortunately wouldn't have been able to participate in an English discussion today. But yeah, it's really, yeah, what I'm sharing is the work that they're doing. And wait, what was your question, Lindsay?
Can
Oh,
you
the
give an
example.
yeah,
Yeah,
like give us something
right.
to see.
Well,
Yeah.
when we refer to culture as a resource, I mean, elders, for example, a specific example is the elders.
Mhm.
I think for women, for children, for families, for communities, they are a resource, given their knowledge, given their capacity to, organize people, their capacity to communicate. And then I guess another a good example of in terms of how are we actually incorporating culture. I guess I didn't sort of mention yeah, the two programs that my team is involved with is the first one is integrating positive cultural schools, and grandmothers, occasionally grandfathers, but the grandmothers are more suited for this task with young children. Grandmothers doing storytelling, which the content of the stories is passing on the values of the culture. Values. We just did a little study and had communities and categorize the importance from their perspective, and also from the perspective of children, of different values. And the little participatory assessment we did, the number one value that came out of these interviews with community members was respect and learning from elders. So, and just to add to that, one of the activities with the schools, this is one of 5 little booklets in French, but that my team developed in collaboration with the Ministry of Education. The other booklets being African Values for Today's Children and Story Tales and Proverbs. So I think that's an example of how culture is being built on, and how we see it as a resource. The values themselves, the grandmothers, yeah. And the other example, grandmothers as a resource, is that really across Africa, traditionally and up until now, especially more traditionally, because it's waning a bit, but really the responsibility for socialization of young girls is the responsibility of grandmothers, not of mothers, or more so of grandmothers. And so we really, very few other programs, I was going to say none, very, very few other programs that are supporting girls recognize the grandmother resource related to supporting girls in their development and upbringing. And so that's a core. The second program that we're involved with is Girls Holistic Development, which is supporting girls' education and discouraging child marriage, teen pregnancy, and female genital mutilation, with the grandmothers as a resource. So a cultural resource. That's why we talk about cultural resources.
Yeah. You're coming in a little spotty, so I just want to repeat for everyone that the first kind of push that you were making was that there is that you are promoting cultural values in schools. So I think this is really significant that the Grandmother Project in Southern Senegal is working with schools that are local to bring grandmothers in to support the school, but also to to read to them, to tell stories, to be part of the curriculum, to ensure that there's a passing down of cultural values. And Judi, correct me if I'm wrong, you've actually worked with the ministry in Senegal on this as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, the 5 reading booklets and then a teacher's guide that we developed, yeah, went through a very long process, more than 3 years, of being officially approved by the Ministry of Education. And actually, yeah, a very positive result of, result of our long-term relationship with the ministry is that in the present 5-year national education plan, one of the 5 priority goals is strengthening the teaching of cultural values in schools. And we can trace, the links between our development of our relationship with the ministry and that the fact that that's been identified at a very high level. Unfortunately, so we have the strong moral support of the Ministry of Education. Unfortunately, they don't have resources to support other things beyond, trying to keep the schools, put roofs on schools and benches and pay the teachers, but strong moral support at that level, and then at the local level, very strong support. And both the local and the national Ministry of Education people, they keep repeating often they would like to see this program, across Senegal. But of course, I mean, that requires resources. So yeah, so for now we're working in one area.
A lot of the people that have connected with us for the Grandmother Collective see kind of have the same aha moment that I had when I met you, which is, oh yeah, of course, grandmothers, such a powerful, incredible feature in many of our lives. Older women, grandmother figures, etc. But we also hear, and I'm sure you do too, that they get in the way, that they promote negative cultural values, or that they have the potential to, halt progress. I think sometimes is like how that's proposed or shared. What do you say to those people that are concerned that the way that things used to be is not, progressive enough or advancing us into whatever the 21st century is bringing us?
Right. Well, and the idea of change through culture, there's culture and there's change. So what we are working on, it's not about preserving everything from tradition. As I mentioned, I mean, in the area where we're working, and in many places, well, across the global South, for example, girls' education is not valued as much as boys. And while in many countries now you have equal numbers of boys and girls going to primary school, when girls get to puberty, the numbers decrease. They're not and the boys go on. As I say, the one of the things we often say is we're trying to, in our work, it's creating a bridge between the past and the future, the present and the future. So it's about supporting, encouraging, reinforcing the positive in the past, and then promoting change. I think a main thing about the grandmothers, and especially my colleagues in health, they will always talk about how harmful advice that grandmothers give. I think maybe across the global South, for example, an issue like childhood diarrhea, which is a main killer of young children. In many cultures, the tradition and grandmothers would be advising not to give fluids because a lot is coming out, so you shouldn't be putting more in. But the point about grandmothers, it's not that all of the rationale, what I always say, the rationale, the argument for the need to involve grandmothers, it's not that everything that they are advising is beneficial, but rather that they are powerful, that they have authority, and that they are present. know, if it's young children, if it's a woman who's pregnant, who has, you know, a young child, or yeah, even adolescent girls, certainly the, you know, the educational social services people are few and far between. And the ones who are there every day, it's the grandmothers, the aunties, and who are influencing. So the point is their power and influence. And I think we make a big mistake when we focus on maybe a few harmful practices and try and go around them, which also I think can make them even more defensive vis-a-vis, you know, proposals to change their,
Yeah, they
their
draw a harder line. Like, I'm really, this is the way it needs to be, rather than bringing them along on a journey.
yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you, we have people that join us from North America and Europe who are also expressing, you know, a similar. I'm a young parent, and like there's stuff my mom suggests that's not always like the latest in parenting. And so it is definitely, I think, you know, for your context, maybe a little sharper, but I think something that many of us are still try to navigate in our intergenerational connection. Okay, so Judi, I think I have like maybe 2 questions left. Okay, so one of them is, you have been so systematic in proving change through culture, really taking a lot of time and resources to build the evidence, right? And I think Holly's going to put a link in the chat so people can have access to the myriad of resources and publications that you've put out, as you know, that your team has put out over the years to really create the evidence of this change. And I wondered if you might comment on maybe a couple highlights of that evidence-based approach that, you know, might be interesting to folks who are here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we from some external research and evaluations, we do have evidence that the change through culture approach is effective. I think there's still things that we need to understand and learn, but and from the start, when we really started on a very small scale in 2008 with this work in Senegal, and the idea has been an ongoing learning process. And so and so I guess some key learning or evidence that's come out of the work, like for example, related to the program with the schools, integrating positive cultural values into the schools, where initially and up until now in Senegal, very often there are conflictual relationships between teachers and communities. And secondly, parents are not highly motivated to send their kids to school or to leave them there because they don't see that it's culturally relevant. And so an external assessment that was done in the school program, we were able to see that, able to document the fact that communities' attitudes towards schools, towards schooling has changed, and specifically related to girls, when whereas parents can be hesitant about sending their girls to school, you know, they're going to be walking off some distance and, you know, out of the purview of the family, that their confidence in schools, and specifically for girls, has increased. So I think we have been able to document the fact that from communities' perception, when schools become more culturally relevant, families are more supportive of them, i.e. send and let their girls continue in school. The other thing related to really major finding that we've been able to document, and regarding these social norms related to girls, for example, related to girls' education, in an area where as I was saying before, where boys' education is favored over girls, we have been able to document really a shift in families' attitudes towards the importance of doing as much as they can to keep them in school. Also related to child marriage, and we can't claim that these problems, that these issues have been addressed to 100%, but we have been able to document through these evaluations and all, positive shifts and trends. And equally, female genital mutilation, which is a very deeply ingrained practice. The grandmothers are culturally responsible really for perpetuating that tradition, but unfortunately other programs see them as the problem and go around them. We have involved them, and they, through an approach really based on respect and dialogue, and they are really the ones who are leading the effort to catalyze change in community. So we've been able to document those changes. Still more to be done along those lines, but yeah.
Great, thanks, Judi. So before I hand it over to people to ask questions, I wondered if you might give advice for organizations or people that are thinking about or trying to incorporate something like a change through culture model into their work. I'm sure there's been challenges along the way, stumbling blocks. What would be some ways that you would advise folks to take on this kind of work?
Well, I think the starting point in any program, in developing any program, is understanding the context, the sociocultural context, and doing that through listening, through discussions with people from that context. So, and asking them whatever the issues are, discussing with them how they see it, and who do they think, a major thing, I think, who do they think should be involved. I don't know. I think, contexts vary a lot and issues being approached vary a lot. But the starting point is having a good understanding of the context and developing relationships with people in that context, and understanding how they see the issues, and really listening to them in terms of how they see possible strategies for. Usually programs come with the strategies all worked out. We're concerned these issues, and this is what we want to do, and they try and convince communities that to participate in what's already been planned. So I think going back a few steps, it's really understanding how communities see those issues.
So the harder work is actually convincing. I'm guessing the harder work for you has been to convince a larger international development community to do less of that imposing of strategy and more listening. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah. Major challenge. Major challenge. Well, and also it's just the other thing is recognizing that other cultural contexts are very different than those of the North. If I take the example of programs for girls, almost all of the programs supporting girls, as we see it, are very girl-centric. Child marriage, for example, focusing on girls, assuming that girls can change the social norm, that suggests that, or that supports the idea that they should be married off around puberty when they're 14, 15, 16. So just the need to recognize that girls alone can't make those changes. And it needs to be a systems approach, and everybody around them needs to be involved to support girls. But that's, it's a very Western idea that these little autonomous girls who are in, Seattle or Dallas or wherever, or in, Rome, whatever, should be and can, be autonomous change makers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Judi, do you have any final thoughts? Or final or we just say thank you and appreciate everybody for coming out. And
yeah, well, I think what all of our work has shown, and kind of been working on different issues, is that specifically grandmothers are a neglected resource, and that when they are approached through respect and dialogue, their role and influence can, I think what we have found in all cases, they are open to learning and to strengthening the roles that they're fulfilling. That doesn't mean that it happens overnight. Yeah, sometimes we're in a hurry, but we have in our experience, we've definitely seen that the potential is great.
yes, the impact is deep. It's deep impact.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, thank you, Judi. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone. And there's more to come. Thank you all.